Danielle Graeber, clinical psychologist, founder of 12-Point Psychology and 12 Points Training, and the SPARKS approach to personal development for therapists to help them get comfortable in taking care of themselves as well as they take care of their clients. I literally did a business coaching course trying to help me figure out how to launch SPARKS and how to talk about it. And the question that kept coming up was, what is it? Like, what does it even mean? Is this some sort of like sneaky way to get us talking about self-care? Because yeah, I know self-care. And it's not that, but it's much more than that as well. It's basically a holistic approach to taking care of the person sitting in the therapist chair so they can more authentically connect to their clients and relieve some of that pressure to feel like they always need to be doing more, giving more, getting comfortable with just being yourself and realizing that you as you are is good enough. You are worth much more than what you do for people. And I think that's a message that a lot of therapists maybe didn't get early on in their lives, and that tends to, unfortunately, I think, be exacerbated by our training, by our internships, and often by the work in some of the organizations that we work for. We do become seen as our KPIs or our retention rates or our whatever. We're not that. I am an animal assisted therapist, but it's not who I am. And my ability to work as an animal assisted therapist does not define me as a person or my worth in general. We got to be more than one thing. So SPARKS came about through my own issues with burnout, because big surprise that happened. I was definitely stereotypical therapist. I was a self-sacrificer. I had massive unrelenting standards. I worked like 90 hours a week to get my master's done, and was really proud of that. Like, even telling you this now, I'm just like, hey, look how good was I did 90 hours a week. Look how productive I was being. Look how good I was. I still managed to go to the gym most nights. There's a part of me still that it's just like, I'm so proud of that. That's so good. But I wasn't in the equation. It was all about what I could do, how many clients I could see, how they were doing, what their progress was like. And if a client had a bad week, I had a bad week. But too much of my identity and sense of worth was tied up in my title, in my client work, in how my clients were doing. And I did think that, I know what self-care is. I go to the gym. That's exercise. That's self-care. I get a massage now and then. That's self-care. And that's kind of the ticket that was sold when you sign up to do this job. And I don't think that's right. When I did finally really crash and burn, none of the traditional self-care approaches, none of the stuff I could find in books online, it all let me down. It all just gave me other checklists. It just gave me new checklists and new things to do, when, if you've ever experienced burnout, the last thing I wanted to do was add to my to-do list. I didn't have capacity to do something else. And I had zero belief that adding something else to my checklist was actually going to help. So I started going back to basics. My original career before psych was in medical science. And so I had a background in, immunology, neurology. And I started looking at, what do we know about burnout? What do we know about what happens in the brain when we're burnt out? What do we know about what's happening in the body when we burn out? What's happening psychologically? And then can we kind of work our way backwards? So if we know if this is where we end up if we burn out, what does that look like if we go backwards? And what can we learn about the end result that will help inform helpful approaches? And that became my integrative self-care approach. And that really was just about, how do we recover from burnout, and what can we put in place to prevent it down the track? And that worked really, really well from the recovery from burnout. It was really helpful. And if you're interested in that one, it's still on the website. You can look at that. That's integrative self-care. But then, again, shock horror, I recognized that I was starting to burn out again. And I'm like, no, I'm doing all the things. I'm taking care of my brain. I'm taking care of my body. I'm doing all the things. And that was the key. I was still focused on doing. There was still no room to be. There was still no sense of self and identity outside of my role what I did for other people, what I was doing for my friends, what I was doing for my family, what I was doing. Like, it was still all about the doing, including the self-care. If I'm doing all of this, I'll be fine. And I sort of realized, oh, we've got this the wrong way around. We need to focus on being okay so we can do what we actually want to do and do it well. And that was kind of the genesis of SPARKS. So if we know that something like 80% of therapists tend to score pretty highly on self-sacrificing and unrelenting standard schemas. So for non-schema therapists, the majority of us tend towards perfectionism and people-pleasing. And that's kind of encouraged by our training. What is university if not like heaven for the perfectionist? I get to put in all of this work and all of this time, and I get graded at the end of it, and that tells me if I'm a good person or not. And if I get a HD, yay! If I get a credit, I suck. It tends to encourage that. You know, if you want to get into honors, into masters, you're encouraged to keep doing better. And again, there's that word again, doing. You're encouraged to keep doing better. When you start working, you're encouraged to do lots of PD, do lots of training, do lots of client hours, get your skills up. You're encouraged to do skills. Again, we're encouraged to do more. Nobody talks about, or certainly when I was coming through, no one talked about beyond you should take care of yourself, and here's a checklist of things to do to take care of yourself. No one sort of talked about the impact of this work on your relationships, on your perspective on the world, on the fact that you have more relationships and intense relationships and then intense breakups than most contestants on Love Island have in a series. You know, you spend this sometimes really quite short and intensive time with someone, you know everything about their life and their history, sometimes better than they do, and then they're gone. If you had that therapeutic relationship, if you were invested with them, if you were a self-sacrificing, perfectionistic, people-pleasing, blah, blah, you were really invested in them, and then they're gone. And nobody talked about that sort of stuff. Nobody talked about how it felt to be working with a client who was getting worse, or who had, or was looking at unaliving themselves. Nobody talked about any of that stuff. And I realized that we needed to be talking about that stuff. We needed to be talking about this person sitting in the therapist chair and that half of the therapeutic relationship. Because if that half of the therapeutic relationship is living in their schemas, or is living in their coping modes, or is living in their parts, then they're never going to be able to connect authentically and safely with the clients. They're going to either end up becoming quite enmeshed, or it's going to be quite surface. But either way, we're not going to get that same satisfaction and positive results that are the things that are the most rewarding part of the job. So SPARKS is really about, all right, what are the core needs, the core childhood needs that generally lead to self-sacrificing and unrelenting standards? And surprise, surprise, therapists tend to score quite highly on those as unmet needs. And that's things like safety, emotional safety, physical safety. Those needs often weren't met as children. Emotional expression tends to score pretty low for a lot of therapists. They weren't necessarily encouraged to express their own emotions. So they learned that my emotions don't count. I need to focus on everybody else's to either get praise or at least not get into trouble. Autonomy is a really interesting one. So a lot of therapists score quite highly on autonomy. They score quite highly on, I was encouraged to be independent. I was encouraged to make my own decisions. But when you drill down into it, it's more about they were often over-parentified. So again, they were either praised or at least didn't get into trouble for taking on more of a caretaker or parentified role within the family. And that might be for younger siblings, that might be for a parent, but it wasn't that they were encouraged to be independent. They were, thrown in the deep end of the pool and sink or swim kind of time. And they swam. And so there's pride attached to that. So when you throw them in the deep end in a new organization, say, for example, you're brand new to Melbourne, you've only just moved here a week ago, you rock up to the first day of your job in Elstonwick, you didn't know Elstonwick existed until like a week ago, They give you a car and say, okay, your first client is out in Frankston and we've just got a call. He's on the train tracks with a knife. Where's Frankston? And for those not familiar with Melbourne, as I was not, Eltonwick and Frankston is a good 45-minute drive. So I took pride in the fact, though, that I managed that day. I got through that day. I managed it okay, and there was a reasonable outcome. I was proud of myself for that. I didn't stop to think, wow, that's messed up. You should not be doing that to someone on their very first day, in their very first time in this role. This was probably a bit messed up. And I have heard stories similar to that so many times. That sink or swim that so many then get praised for. So yeah, I got like, oh, good work. Yeah, you did a good job today. So I'm like, oh, that's, yeah, good. I got that praise. I did good. I was doing good. So those unmet needs of childhood, or those poorly met needs in childhood, then end up getting praised and rewarded further in these roles. So SPARKS is about addressing those and learning to almost reparent yourself in a way, but learn how to have compassion for the more vulnerable parts, to learn not to get annoyed with the part that was freaking out trying to find this kid. And this was so long ago, you didn't have GPS in the cars. I had a Melways. I hadn't even seen a Melways until that day. But yeah, a part of me was absolutely freaking out. And I was so disconnected from that part. I was so annoyed by that part that I didn't even realize at the time. And when it did kind of crop up later and I was a bit stressed out and everything, I was like, oh, like, you did it. You're fine. That's your job. That's what you're supposed to do. There was no patience or time for that vulnerability in any way. So SPARKS is about how do we learn to heal those parts. And we do that through focusing on, not adding to a to-do list at all. This is not to add to the cognitive load at all. No, we do this by focusing on 6 domains. We look at how are we doing in terms of safety and boundaries. What are we doing that is making all of those parts, the vulnerable parts, the part that's proud of being able to, be good in a crisis, the whatever, but all of those parts, what do they all need to be feeling safe? How are we doing at meeting all of their needs? What boundaries are we okay to put in place? Which boundaries are we not okay to put in place? What is that about? Can we correct that? What would happen if we did correct that? But we look at physical health and body care. And again, that's not, I go for a run every day. Because some days you might not need a run. Some days you might need a rest. So it's checking in. What do all of these parts need today? How can I best serve this domain and give my brain and my body this message of you are worth rest? You are allowed to do something just because it feels nice and it is good. When we were doing the group coaching program in August, there was an absolutely adorable story on this one when someone figured out that for 30 years they had been making their cheese toasties, their jaffles, the same way that their mum had, and they hadn't had much money when she was a kid, and she's like, I suddenly realized I'm still using these really thin little pieces of cheese because that's how mum made it, and we were sort of told that we were being greedy or we couldn't afford that if we had any more. And pretty much every time she had ever had a cheese toastie at home, she'd always be like, oh, I really like cheese. I'd really like to have a little bit more cheese, but I can't. That's not okay. And when we got to the physical health domain and we were talking about these kind of blind spots we have to that stuff, sometimes she's like, hey, I'll buy my own cheese. I can afford a bit more cheese. Oh, I can put more cheese on this toastie. And it was the best tasting toastie she'd ever had in her life. She was so happy. And it's all about, this is what I mean. She was going to be making the toastie anyway. But by thinking about that physical health domain and what we'd been talking about in terms of the messages that we send to ourselves, the messages that we've internalized with some things, recognizing, paying attention to that stuff, and then treating yourself and treating your body, treating your brain, treating those parts with more kindness, and treating yourself with more kindness. Achievement and acknowledgement. This is a huge one. So again, as therapists, we tend to minimize that stuff that we do naturally well. I don't know how many times I have heard, and this might be familiar with you, but all we did was talk about flight and fight, or all we did was play Uno, or all we did was we just did this. Yeah, minimizing the stuff that we're doing in session if it feels easy. But the things that feel easy are often the things that we're naturally good at. It feels much easier to be present in session and to be attuning with the client and responding in the moment, as opposed to holding a checklist in your head of what I need to be doing here. And then if they do this, I need to do this. If they do this, I need to do this. That's exhausting and that feels hard. But we equate hard as, well, if it's not hard, then it can't be worth much. I've got this really messed up idea that, and it's such a common saying, again, you don't even think about it. Nothing worth having comes easy. Bullshit. Like, no. Sometimes the stuff that's worth having, the stuff that we need to acknowledge as an achievement, actually does come very naturally to us. I find it much easier to sit in a room, to attune with a client and be present with them than I do to try and like run a manualized program. Even these videos, if I try and script these, oh my God, it's so hard. And for ages, I'm like, well, then I'm crap at this. I must be crap at this because I should be able to like read a script and do it this way. Until I went, maybe the fact that I could talk the ear off a donkey or whatever, maybe I should just go with that. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe the fact that it's easy doesn't mean it's automatically worthless. So achievement and acknowledgement is really all about paying attention. It's shifting focus to, what am I already doing well that I'm maybe missing, that I'm not giving myself credit for, that I'm not acknowledging as an achievement? Or maybe it's, having a mammoth to-do list and never getting to the end of it, because every time you tick something off, 5 more things take its place, because we've always got stuff that we do have to do. Something as simple as, instead of sitting down and having that massive to-do list in front of you, pick 3 things off that list that you're going to do today and tick them off as you go. And you get that little burst of dopamine of just like, hey, I achieved that. Taking that second to acknowledge that I achieved that. And then going, okay, do I want to add a few more things? I finished those all by 10 a.m. Maybe I can add a few more things. But just giving yourself, like, just changing up the way that you're doing some things to be kinder to yourself. Relationships and connections. A big focus on that is that relationship between yourself and between all of those different parts, but also prioritizing those external relationships, the friendships, the partnerships, the work friendships, the whatever it might be, that fill you up. The relationships where you celebrated, not tolerated. And then you might be seeing how these are all still integrated, because that might mean putting some boundaries in place with some relationships that aren't so healthy, and being okay with that, or learning to be okay with that, which is also going to be potentially good for your physical health, because you're not going to be as stressed about having to see this person again, can also be an achievement, because you're going to do something that felt hard or that was a big shift. So with just one action, looking at kind of your friends and asking yourself, all right, who amongst my friends would I drive to a pub, sit down and have a beer with? Who of my friends would I stick around for the second beer? Who of my friends would I trust to look after my dog all weekend? Or my child? Who amongst my friends would I trust to look after my child all weekend? And this immediately gives you a really kind of visceral reaction of, yeah, okay, so I've got some friends they're there for a good time. Maybe not the most reliable or trustworthy for the bigger stuff. Or I've got these friends, they're always there for me. I know they're reliable. I know I could trust them with anything. How much time am I spending with them? How am I prioritizing them? Because it's often the case that it's the good time friends, or the fair weather friends, or whatever you're going to call it. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. Those are often the ones that are taking up a lot of our energy and time, because otherwise there's going to be a tantrum and you don't want to deal with that. So you give in, it's like, yeah, let's go have that. Yeah, let's go have that beer. That'll be awesome. When you're actually going, oh God, no. And I'm going to come up with an excuse to get out of there as soon as possible. What if you just didn't go? What if you put in a boundary and just went, yeah, you know what? No, not now. What if you learned to say no as a full sentence? What would that feel like? What would that change? Now we come to kindness, and you would have heard me use the word kindness through a lot of the other domains, because again, this is all integrated. If we're kind to ourselves, we can put a boundary in place. If we're kind to those different parts, we can check in and go, how does it feel if I decide to do this? We can factor ourselves into our decision making and into the equation. For the most part, we generally don't have any problem being kind to other people. Sometimes we're overly kind to other people who potentially don't really deserve that. But when it comes to showing kindness to ourselves, to nurturing ourselves, to being compassionate to ourselves, not as good. Can be so compassionate and have so much, almost infinite patience for so many of our clients. But when it comes to unrelenting standards, perfectionism, if we not even screw up, if we just don't, if we get that credit instead of that HD, it can be so hard on ourselves and so bad at showing compassion for ourselves. So that kindness domain in Sparks is really about that self-kindness, self-nurturance, self-compassion stuff. And then finally, we have spontaneity and entertainment, because if those other domains aren't clicking so well, if those other domains aren't being prioritized, if they're not a focus, it doesn't leave a lot of room for spontaneity. If we don't feel safe, we're not going to try something new. If we're not looking after our physical body, we might not be able to try something new. If we are not feeling a sense of kindness to self, or if we feel like if I don't get that HD, then the world is over. It's much scarier to try for something new, because we know we're not going to be nice to ourselves if we fail. So all of those domains are very much integrated. All of those domains are designed to start healing some of those core unmet needs that led to us really struggling to sit in a room as our authentic selves and be happy with that and be comfortable and confident with that. It's the thing that keeps us burning out. It's the thing that keeps us looking for the next shiny squirrel that's going to fix all of our problems. The next diary, the next planner, I'm going to get organized, and then this diary is going to be the answer to all my questions and all my problems, and then I'll get organized and I'll stop missing things and I'll stop burning out. Or I just need to do this certification in this modality and then I'll be able to fix everyone. Whatever the next thing is, whatever the next thing I need to do is, Sparks helps us realize that that's not where the feeling good is going to lie. The feeling good is going to lie in, I'm okay. Not just okay, I'm good enough as I am. Mr. Darcy and Bridget Jones, I like you very much just as you are. That's what I want you to be able to say to yourself. Not every day, because I still have days. There's still that old pathway in there that's just kind of like, nah, this client really needs someone who can do X, Y, and Z. You're not good enough. Or even, this client would have got better much faster with someone else. That's still in there somewhere. But how I've learned to respond to it, how I've learned to manage it, and all of the different things that Sparks has helped me put in place, the way that I think about a lot of this stuff, all of that has changed so drastically. And not just for me, but for the people who've been through the individual coaching and the group coaching. The qualitative feedback, what people said during and after the program was amazing and really, really gratifying. But I didn't expect so early on to have such good stats backing me up as well, and backing Sparks up. Like literally, the numbers are better than most of the numbers that I had to work with for any of my theses. But the number that sort of warmed my heart the most was this very, very simple question that I asked, which was, how often do you feel good enough to be in the room with your client, as opposed to always be feeling pressured to be doing? And 100% of participants when we started rated themselves as 1 or 2. So they never, or very rarely, felt good enough in the therapy room. And that's so sad. That's so sad to think about the pressure that comes with that. This constant sense of, I need to be doing more, I need to be giving more. and how satisfying it would be then, even if a client is doing well, even if the client is objectively getting better, not being able to take any pride in that. And this is when you get the clinicians who are like, if the client's doing well, oh, that's them, they've worked really hard, they've done this, they've done that. The client's not doing well, yeah, I'm crap, just haven't done the right thing yet, so I have to find something different to do. Always comes back to that do. So after, and the first group that we ran was only a 4-week program, 100% at the end of that 4 weeks answered that question with a 3 or a 4. So I sometimes or regularly feel confident enough to be a therapist in the room with my clients. And that's amazing. That was so gratifying. That was so gratifying. And that's exactly what I wanted Sparks to be about, and exactly the transformations that I was hoping to see in Sparks. So if that sounds like something that might be of use or interest to you, then please do get in touch, leave a comment, say hi, send me an email, check out our website, but learn a little bit more about Sparks and how it might help you to start feeling more comfortable in the therapist chair. And how it might also be helpful for some of your clients. You know, a lot of our clients have those same self-sacrificing, unrelenting standards going on. And for a lot of them, having these conversations around being versus doing has been monumentally important for them as well. So please do get in touch if you have any questions or you'd like to learn a bit more. Thanks. Bye.